This week, some hands-on tips on how to use Claude Code to create some amazing and not so amazing software. I'll also walk you through what worked and what didn't as I use an example of a 100% vibe-coded Python Flask application. Then the discussion will continue with the crew discussing the future of vibe coding and how AI may better help in creating and securing software. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your defenses. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. ThreatLocker's zero-trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots, just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock. Ever feel like your network infrastructure is stuck in the past? Meet Meter, the company reimagining what it means to get and stay online. Meter delivers full-stack networking, wired, wireless, and cellular, all in one seamless, scalable, and secure solution. From hardware design and firmware to software, deployment, and support, Meter streamlines every part of your network while giving you all the control and transparency you need. Whether you're managing a branch office, retail stores, or a massive data center, Meter gives you performance, reliability, and the visibility you need to stay in control. Thanks to Meter for sponsoring. Go to securityweekly.com/Meter to book a demo now. That's securityweekly.com/Meter, METER. Coming to you from the Hacker Syndicate Studios, this is Paul's Security Weekly, episode number 902, being recorded on Wednesday, November 19th, 2025. We're recording this segment a little early. You'll hear this over the Thanksgiving break. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm, of course, Paul Asadorian, joined by Miss Mandy Logan. Mandy, welcome.
Why, thank you. And I'm really excited to see this. I really am intrigued to know what your experience was and how much it's cost.
Yes, we can certainly dive into that. I didn't get the Claude stats for how much this app actually cost me, but yeah. Mr. Sam Bound is here with us. Sam, welcome.
Good evening. And Mandy, you mean people actually pay for AI?
Well, that's all I hear about from people is that on vibe coding, with Claude at least.
Boy, I don't know.
Yeah. If you want a solid platform, you got to pay for it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's at least my opinion. Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
There's no such thing as a free lunch, is what you're saying, Paul?
There is not.
I'm disappointed that we're not pretending to be in the future. I was all set to make all sorts of prognostications.
That's
what
right.
Happened in the last week, darn it.
Happy
Thanksgiving, everyone.
That's right. Mr. Lee Neely is here with us. Lee, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here. Like I said, I'll be interested to see how that worked out and find out where the rubber meets the road here with vibe coding.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. I've been I started small and then it kind of snowballed, and then I was like, you know what if I just vibe code the whole thing? And I'll walk you through some of the walls I've run up against, and some of that could be the way that I'm prompting it, and I'm learning as I'm going. So I'm not claiming to be the world's foremost expert on how to use Claude Code, which is the command line coding assistant from Anthropic that I'm using on Linux to do my coding projects. And I was like, eventually I'll dig in and start ripping through the code myself. But I'm like, how far could I push the vibe coding? So I'll walk you through some stats. I pulled some stats from my Claude coding session. So it says there were 5 major sessions. It created over 12,000 lines of documentation. Now, the documentation is kind of split, right? Because Claude will document its own prompting and actions that it's taking so that it can go back and read that. And I can prompt it to go back and read that. So I can pick up where I left off. So I can kind of go back to things. within the Claude session. I've got a little hack where you can actually store those files in a different directory and then git ignore that directory. So when you're ready to put it on GitHub, all of your like internal developer Claude documentation is in fact separate. It does do a really good job of creating user documentation, by the way. I actually prompted it recently to create the user documentation, and it's very verbose. Like I almost want to adjust some of my prompts, so it's almost like too thorough with the documentation. So it does create a lot of it. Let's see what else. It created maybe 1,000 or more lines of Python code. I can talk you through it's kind of two different things I did. I also prompted it to put the entire project in Docker, and I'll tell you how I prompted it to do that. So the application that I wrote is I call it Weaver, and that was part of what the acronym that actually Claude helped me come up with. And it's web interface for vulnerability research, WIVR. Weaver is the name of the application. And so what I've done is I've indexed a whole bunch of databases primarily from GitHub, right? Created local databases and then prompted it to create logic to search that database given certain criteria from the user. So I'm aggregating all 300 plus thousand CVEs in a couple of different databases. There's 18 gigs across 6 repositories of data that I'm indexing. And I'm told that the build performance, so that must be the database when it builds, it's almost 9,000 CVEs a second it can index and put inside of a database. So it's using SQLite for the databases to do that, which is pretty cool. I drove the technology, right? So when I prompt it, and this is kind of my first tip, if you're building an application with Claude Code, you want to prompt it to create a plan. Like, hey, Claude, I have an idea. I want you to create a plan. And very important, tell it to include phases and checkpoints in the plan. And so what that will do is if you ask Claude to do like a pretty large feature, it'll actually break it down into multiple steps. And then it allows you to guide it from there. So I'll be like, Claude, implement this, exploit checking feature. And I'm like, break it into phases and different checkpoints. And the keyword checkpoint is very important there too, for prompting Claude. And then it'll create, like, let's say it does 3 phases and each phase has multiple checkpoints. And so then it'll ask me like, hey, how do you want to proceed? And I'm like, do phase 1 and phase 2, but in phase 2, don't do checkpoint 3, right? So that gives you some kind of fine grain, like, knobs and dials for Claude. Because if you prompt it very generically, it's going to like basically extrapolate things on its own, and that may not be what you want. And so you want to reel the reins in on that. So first tip, very important, phases and checkpoints, I found produces much better quality code in Claude. So the way I started this project was, so some of the history behind this project, I've used a lot of other open source tools to analyze CVE data, right? I've put it in it. There's one that puts it in a Mongo database. There's other projects that index and allow you to search CVEs to overlay exploit information. Many of those projects like stop working, like the developer creates them and then they don't update it. So like there's one that I was using called CVE-search. It was like a very generic name, and it actually scraped OpenCVE.io's website to obtain the CVE information. But what happened was OpenCVE changed the format of their website and the author never updated the code. And so I was like, you know what? Let me just try and use Claude and create my own tool, because now like I know what I want from this tool. I know how I want to search it. And so I started with a very basic Python script. And I said, like, I researched it and I was like, what's the best way to get CVE data? And I was like, let me start with the NVD. So NIST's NVD, their API. In their API, you can register and get a free API key that gives you better rate limiting, right? So you're not as rate limited. You're still rate limited, but not as much when you register for an actual key. And I think I prompted, so when I was kind of short, I was trying to conserve tokens. I'll talk about that in a moment. But I went to another AI and I'm like, hey, just create me like a Python script that can just pull a basic thing from the NVD API and give it a key. And then I put that in a directory. And then I git cloned the other project that isn't working any longer. And I put that in the directory. And then I started prompting Claude and I'm like, make just a basic Python script, a command line Python script that lets me do basic searching. And then I was like, this other tool has a bunch of features, go analyze them. So Claude actually analyzed the other GitHub repository and understood how it worked and all that stuff. And then I'm like, all right, let's cherry pick some features. I'm like, go take that feature and implement it in our script. And Claude even said, like, your approach, Paul, is better than this other project because you're using the official NVD API. So we started building from a better base. And then I prompted the command line and I got the command line to a point where it was pretty functional. And I was like, well, that's neat. So then I was like, you know what? Create a plan. Like, don't do anything yet. But I'm like, create a plan. Tell me what web technologies you'd use and how you would structure an application that would build a web interface that does the same thing as this command line version. And since I had coded and tested like a working command line version, when I started to build a web application, it had a base of logic and code to kind of pull from that I thought reduced a lot of errors and a lot more prompting to get that web interface to a working state. So then I just started prompting on the web interface. And again, I prompted it before it created it, I was like, tell me what technologies you're going to use. Are you going to use a database? Are you going to use like what Flask? Like, how are you going to do the web? And it was like, I'm going to use Flask. I'm going to pull style sheets from this website. And what else? It's going to use XHTML and maybe some JavaScript to do some of the interface stuff. I was like, yeah, all it looks good. And I'm like, get started, right? And I'm like, do phase 1. And then like build a basic framework, let me do some testing. Then I'm like, all right, do phase 2. So I kind of did it in smaller steps. That was just Sam's early advice to me when coding with AI, right? Smaller steps, and started building the web interface. And so I then told it to build a whole bunch of databases too. And so doing research, I was like, where can I find information about exploits and vulnerabilities? And so what the end result of that was, let me see if I can open this in a new tab so I don't lose that tab. The end result of that was I have a lot of databases. So I told it to pull the sysakev, the exploit DV, POC and GitHub is a GitHub repository that tracks any proof of concept exploits that get published to GitHub. 0 Day Today is the archive that we talked about on the show. I had to pull in all the Metasploit exploits, the entire local CVE database directly from MITRE.org, the local NVD database, which is my primary database. So there is a GitHub repository that takes all of the data from NVD, puts it in a GitHub repository in JSON format. So the code actually takes that GitHub repository and builds a SQLite database of the NVD database. And same thing with sysavol enrichment, right? Clones that GitHub repository, builds a local database. And so it took a lot of prompting to like get this page where I could, select ones to update. So I can basically update all the databases. I can update individual ones, and it gives me some statistics on that. It takes a long time to build some of the databases. The local CVE one takes the longest, over 317,000 entries. So it takes a long time to build that. So those were all of the databases. And again, it took some prompting to like get it to correctly build, index, and be able to update all of those databases. It was getting confused between like, I would tell it like, go update that database, and it would just like rebuild it with the data that it had. And I'm like, no, you need to update and rebuild. I need you to go pull the latest information from GitHub, then rebuild our local database. And once I got it there, like these databases are rocking now. I have actually since prompted it to build it in Docker. So these databases are actually stored in a Docker volume. And I'll talk a little about the Docker configuration too. So where am I in my journey now? So we created the web app. We talked about that. Implementing just smaller steps. Yeah. So when I prompted it, so one of the things that I learned in prompting Claude was that you can see right here this Claude RC configuration file is super helpful. And I wish I had done like a little more research in Claude Code from the beginning. But you can basically give it prompts. And I'm like, I'm at the point where I'm like, I need to tell it to do things a certain way. So when I'm prompting Claude, I'm like, I don't want you to go outside of the code directory that you're in. If you need temp storage, use a local folder. If you need to restart and rebuild the app, like I prompted it to create a shell script that allows me to restart the app, rebuild the app. It has a nuclear option that blows away all the databases and starts from scratch. There's a log command that automatically tails the logs from the Docker container. And there's one called shell, which gives me a shell on the running container. So it built a nice shell script. I'm like, use that. It was like using all these other commands to like rebuild the app. I'm like, use the script that we created together, dude, to do all that stuff. And so you can give it other prompts. I prompted it like where to put files, like put your Claude. I actually added to this. I'm like, put your Claude instruction files here, put the user documentation here. And so all of this will carry forward in my future conversations. So I could probably do like smarter things in there too. The Reddit on Claude Code is really good. If you look at the subreddit for Claude Code, there's a lot of great tips in there. And I'm just starting to kind of crack open some of the custom configuration. But that's the one that I actually just implemented this one today. So I had it build a Docker environment, but I didn't like, you could just prompt it and be like, hey, Claude, put this app in a Docker environment. And it would go make a lot of decisions on its own on how to do that. And I'm like, no, that's bad. I don't want you to do that. I'm like, create a plan to put this in a Docker container. I'm like, but I want a Docker container image that doesn't contain a lot of vulnerabilities. In fact, I want you to specifically focus on the chain guard containers that they have for free. So there's paid versions and free versions from Chain Guard. Chain Guard does a great job. Props to them. They're not a sponsor on the show, but they provide free container images that have close to 0 CVEs in the container image. So I'm like, start from a secure portion. And it's like, well, the Python version in that container is different from the one that we've been using. I'm like, fine, go build the app, test it with that Python version, and let's flesh out the bugs. And it did that. So it built a really great Docker environment for the application. Built the whole thing on Python and Flask, and it gets confused sometimes. I think now's a good time to talk about the walls that you run up against. And I think the biggest one is with logic. And I think this speaks to a lot of things that we've been saying about AI and LLMs on how they are not a real human being that can make decisions. They're just like performing instructions. And so when I would prompt it to do certain things like the different searches, I'm like, the user can search for a CVE, and I'm like, just go find that record. The user can search for a keyword, so go search for that keyword in the description and show me the results. Like the user can also search for a vendor like Intel or AMD, and I only want the records that are associated with that vendor. Now, since the data is largely unstructured that we're working with, which is another sticking point for me, I might get on my soapbox, but it has a lot of work to do when you give it a vendor name like Intel, because it can't just search the description of a CVE. So it has to apply logic. And so I would prompt it and it would apply some logic. And then I would search a different way and do some testing and it would break. And I was in this constant cat and mouse game of trying to have Claude structure the logic. And I think my tip for that is give it more clear and concise paths. And I'll give you an example. So rather than on the main user page having multiple select, I can actually show you the application. Rather than having like multiple selection boxes here that were guiding it and how it would search, I used radio buttons. And I told Claude, look, there's 3 different search types. Run one at a time. So by simplifying the logic a little bit, I was able to guide Claude to create much less bug and logic error code than before. Because the logic is a lot more simple. So it's very much like a junior developer, right? I wasn't overloading the junior developer by building these complex kind of logic decision trees. I was just like, look, if the user selects keyword, only search keyword in the description. If the user searches vendor, employ our methods that we created to determine the vendor. And this took a little bit of research. So I was like, when you put in Cisco or Fortinet in here, it's going to search the CVE databases in a different way. It's going to first try and look at CPE, common platform enumeration data, but that doesn't exist on every record. But I'm like, if it's there, so I search Fortinet in a CPE that matches our search criteria by time or severity. If it matches and the CPE matches, I'm like, good, you're done. I'm like, that's a great measure. Like, but if it doesn't have a CPE, buried in the JSON data, there's a source identifier field. Now, the source identifier field, and this is where, like, again, my soapbox on the unstructured nature of this data. So your source identifier field in the JSON data in the NVD database can sometimes be an email address. So it's like pcert@intel.com. Or it can be a UUID, in that UUID somehow maps to a vendor name. And I'm not sure where that mapping is actually stored. So it had to do some logic there. So, but once I broke it out, again, I'm actually going to change this to implement some more radio buttons too with the data sources because it gets confused. So this is the main page of the app. I'll just walk you through it a little bit. I prompted it to give me some stats because I wanted to know, when I'm searching the database, how many entries are in each database, what's the latest entry in that database, right? So for local NVD data, is today the 18th? Yeah, so it's about a day behind, right, because of the sync. So the latest entry was yesterday in my local NVD data, and I updated it today. So there's 2 dates there. Latest record, so like the exploit database, the most recent exploit in exploit DB was on October 31st, right? Now I updated it today, but that latest entry is the 31st. So that kind of helped keep some sanity on my databases. So, I mean, then you can just come in here and search, right? Like I can just search for Cisco, if I can spell it right. I can go by vendor because I'm entering a vendor keyword. All severities, sure, give me the last 30 days, search the local database, and go tell me about external third-party exploit information for every entry. So I click search, and because that database is local, it's pretty quick. It automatically sorts by criticality, and it should tell me the more interesting entries here. Of course, now I probably have a bug, although there might not have been critical ones in the past 30 days. Let me try 60 days. I'm going to cheat, use the back button, and it should keep my keyword in there. And so I'm going to search. Yeah. And so if I go back a little further, you get the ASA and FTD one that was being exploited. I still think I have a bug. I want to say there's exploits for this in more than just the CISA vuln enrichment data. But what it will do is present you all the information about these CVEs, right? Where it came from, what you search for, the CPEs. Did CISA have a vuln enrichment entry for it? If it does, it displays that information. And by the way, I really like the CISA vuln enrichment. It indicates exploitation, whether it's automatable, and has a measurement for technical impact. It also indicates whether it's on the CISA KEV or not, and gives you a link right to the exploit. Some interesting ways that I'm finding where exploits exist. In certain NVD records, there is a tag in this references section. It's not in this one, but if there's an exploit, it'll actually tag it with exploit. But also CISA ADP will indicate an exploit, but also we're searching all those other exploit databases, and we're searching the KEV database. So I think it's a pretty complete view. It's kind of what I was looking for. When I'm like, tell me about this vulnerability, I want to know CVSS scores. And actually recently I just adjusted the logic. It pulls all of the CVSS scores, which is a daunting task as an enterprise defender. Is, well, what is the CVSS score? Because NIST can score the vulnerability, The CNA can score the vulnerability. Any other authorized data provider or ADP like CISA can also put a score in there. They can score it with CVSS version 2.0, 3.1, or 4.0. So you get this kind of mishmash of scores. And I've told my system basically always sort by the pull all the scores, sort by the highest one. So that's what it'll sort by. And you can see the description, and then it'll list all your vendor advisories. Actually, I have some code in there that I can export a spreadsheet. In fact, if I do it on this one, my vendor advisory spreadsheet, if I export that, it'll actually consolidate the vendor advisories. And it'll say, this Cisco vendor advisory covers these 6 CVEs, and here are all the scores for those, and kind of aggregates it down. So when I do searches for multiple vendors, there might be 100 CVEs, but when I consolidate the spreadsheet, that may be 62 vendor advisories that are covering 100 CVEs, and it'll kind of break it down for me. And so what I'm able to do, I actually have a pending blog post where I've done some analysis of this, and I said, look, in the past 30 days for enterprise network security vendors, here's the ones that you want to like pay attention to the most, right? Like I've analyzed all of them and given a breakdown, and that was one of the reasons why I created the tool. So again, right now 100% vibe coded, and the limitations I'm running up against are basically logic. So I've got to take steps back to prompt it smaller. The problem that arises from that, which is why I say you get kind of crappy software, is if I ask it to fix a bug or implement a new feature, it'll introduce a new bug or like not regression test it well. And I haven't learned how to prompt Claude other than like, hey, when you implement this feature, I'm like, really try hard not to introduce any bugs. I don't really think that works in a prompt very well. I think there's probably some other prompting I could do to guide it a little better. So the 2 big walls that I hit once the application got this large was, well, 3. So like the first one was it uses a lot more tokens, right? When I was just doing the command line version, I could get away with the $20 a month plan. Once I had the web version, I would run out of tokens like almost instantly because it's analyzing and creating a lot more code that's a lot more complex. So now I'm on the $200 a month thing because I still think it's saving me a bunch of time by not having to code this manually. But the other problems I'm running into, again, big ones are logic. Again, if I prompt it to do something different, it'll break the logic that was there before, and I end up with bugs. Then I have to prompt it again. Then it fixes that, but it breaks the original either feature or bug fix from before. So I get in this constant cat and mouse game with it that I've got to tune my prompting for. And yeah, so those are the kind of walls I'm running up against now. I'm probably at the point where I want to take a little more control and just look at the code myself. I did it in Python Flask because that's what PPWorks is written in, and that's where I have a lot of development experience. PPWorks is our podcast production software that I spend a significant amount of time, over a year, full-time coding that. So I'm like, I know Python Flask. At least now I can go in and I can make some stuff on my own. So, but the sorting and filtering actually works really well. You can load a high, sort by publish date, and it pops through. I haven't told it to paginate the output yet, but I can certainly do that. You do have a config page, which that would show you my API key because I haven't told it to use JavaScript to hide the key yet. But it does have a config database where it stores my API key, which is kind of nice, actually, because I don't have to store it in an environment variable or plain text file. I guess I could encrypt the database as well. So that was kind of neat how it created a configuration database for me. I didn't have to do any of the config for it. That's about it. Any questions about
Yeah,
the
had a
prompts?
couple.
Yeah.
So first off, I mean, I'm hearing you. How tempting is it to? Well, actually, I'm wondering as you're talking about fixing and changing it, and you're trying to do it all with vibe coding. How tempting is it to sit there and just start writing your own Python code?
I do want to. The problem is I feel like I'd fall into an even deeper rabbit hole doing that, and then all I'd be doing is coding this app. Whereas now I can prompt it, and then I go off and I do something else while it's building it, right?
Mhm.
Because it chews through a lot of tokens now. When I implement certain features, I try not to give it too much at once, but even when I do the plan, it's like, hey, this could take 20 to 30 minutes to build this. I'm like, yeah. Go build it and I'll test it. And then I go off and I do
Okay.
something else for half an hour and then I come back. So in that case, it is saving me a lot of time. At this point, I probably do need to go in and specifically the logic, like go in and fix the logic for it, because that's where it falls down. But creating like technical elements like, hey, take this data, analyze it, and create a database and index it. It does that awesome, right? That it
Okay.
is really good at. But again, the logic is where I'm having the most trouble.
It's like you were talking about building local databases of stuff that's out there. Are any considerations for rate limit on how on you're grabbing their repository? Any problems with the folks that own it limiting you doing
Yeah.
that?
GitHub has been good about because I'm just Git cloning, right? So I'm not actually scraping the website. And like for the sysakev data, I'm grabbing their CSV file directly.
Yeah.
So I'm not scraping. The limitation I ran into was there, and I got to see where it put that code. There is code in there that will take the CVE, right? So like, let's say you search for firmware in the past 7 days. I think there's about 30 or so results, or maybe 15 results from that. It'll take all 15 of those CVEs numbers, and it will use the GitHub API, and it will search for any repository that lists that CVE number in an attempt to find an exploit for it on GitHub.
Okay.
GitHub has a rate limiting on its API. And the way that it handled that was some type of caching that I haven't like looked in the technical details of how it implemented it, but it'll basically cache some of the search requests. So like when the results come back, it'll cache them and it'll go through the cache first and then hit the API. So it saves you on some of the rate limiting. But I haven't like peeled back and looked at exactly how it's doing that caching, but it did implement, probably based on knowledge that it had of code that does like overcoming rate limiting is probably a popular question on like Stack Overflow and stuff like that. So it's probably a lot of code examples for it to go, oh, when there's an API and it rate limits, you do this caching thing. And I know how to do that in Python Flask because someone else has already written it. So that's where I think it came from. But I did hit that specific API limit.
Interesting. One of the things that when you describe your interaction with Claude, it sounds a lot like how you'd have a conversation with an intern or other junior developer. Is that just
For
me,
sure.
or that?
No, because it'll do the similar things. Like if it'll try and make some decisions on its own, and I'm like, yeah, but that's not what I asked for. And usually it tries to do too much. Like I didn't ask you to be that fancy. Like I just wanted a basic feature. And I think that's where like your pre-prompts and configuration for Claude Code could probably help in contextualizing the model for you to go, don't go crazy, and I don't know how to do that. And I think that's possible. I got to go through the Reddit threads and see what other people are doing, but I think there's better ways to kind of get it to code the way you want it to code, right? By pre-prompting it in the settings.
So it sounds like you've got a whole. I don't know what the right term in AI is. Like you've got a whole environment you load that represents how you want things done.
Yes.
And you've spent more than 5 minutes building it. I'm wondering how long it took you to get to that point, and how hard is it to bring it up for every session?
Yeah, bringing up for every session's easy. You type Claude and it comes up, and you can basically start prompting it, and it'll spend some tokens reading your configuration. So you can prompt it. So $200 a month. I don't know how long I'm going to sustain that. Right now, there's a return on investment.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe that'll diminish. Maybe it won't, because now I've got now that I have more tokens, I'm like, I got other stuff I needed to do as well. So we'll see. But for this project, it was, if you wanted to use less tokens, that's where I was going. You could prompt it to say, like, implement this feature, but don't rebuild the application and test it on your own. Like, just put the feature in and let me do that. So you could do some of the manual steps and save on some tokens there. But when I had the $20 a month plan, like basically every day I was using all of my tokens.
Oops.
With the $200 a month plan, I don't think I've been able to actually reach the limit. More so because I tell it to go build something, and then I go off and I do other things, right? So that 30 minutes, it might be an hour. Like I may go do a meeting and then, work on a blog post and come back like an hour later, right? So that's why.
How is your employer paying for the tokens, or is this coming out of Bank of Paul?
I'm paying this out of Bank of Paul right now.
Yeah, because I would think if you're, I was thinking that this is really hot, but I'd hate to have developers paying it out of their own pocket. Although it really is
Yeah.
helping them, it's still in service of the company.
Yeah. And, I think most companies are probably in the same boat. You can pay Claude some money or a lot of money depending on how many tokens you want, but then you still have to do token management.
Yeah.
And so I would use my day job's Claude thing, but our developers are using that. So I don't want to take away from their tokens to do like proof of
Right.
concept.
So you're
kind of
telling me
stuff.
there's like one pool of Claude tokens, and you don't, and they actually
Yeah.
have assigned things they want done with them. So that would be
Correct.
kind of impolite to take them without
Correct.
permission.
Yeah. And I think like most companies, like a lot of your AI stuff is tied to your product development. So
the reason I was asking about how long to get it, is I was thinking you have your configuration for Claude, and you mentioned earlier you had another AI write a piece for you. Did you have to recreate that configuration, or could you just take what you did in Claude and give it to the AI so it can come out similarly?
yeah, I've definitely passed data between AIs. I've had one AI generate something and then use it to use. So that's another trick to save tokens. So I have Perplexity and Chat GPT. So sometimes when I start, I'll prompt those, get a base, move that into directory, and then use Claude Code locally.
It almost like sounds like you have a base environment or prompts that the next generation AI you're going to get into to get it to be Paul's environment, and then you start rocking.
Yeah, what I need to do is like a master Python script that it has the APIs to all of the LLMs that I have. And then it has like an algorithm where I can go, all right, I want information on this. Like it goes to the cheaper ones first, pulls the information, and then prompts the one that's more expensive. It's actually a really good idea.
Oh, that would be really neat.
Now we're talking about the future of vibe coding, right?
Yeah.
Mandy.
Which is going to be quickly upon us. Well, I have a couple of points, I guess, back to like Lee's question and your comments about speaking to it like a smart intern. That reminded me of an article in Wired from August that was a staff writer had gone to work for 2 days at Notion in order to vibe code something for them and like present it. And that was what the engineering developers and like I think even the CEO, I'd have to look at that again, but had said, talk to it like a smart intern. And this was somebody who hadn't coded previously, right? So she was like, "Oh, okay, I understand."
Right.
And then she changed
smart
logic.
interns. Yeah, smart interns also misinterpret requirements, and we all do. Senior developers do, and guess what? So do LLMs. So that's still table stakes. But also, I think a tip on prompting is be very explicit with your requirements, just like you would for a junior developer or even a senior developer, right? You have to be very specific with your requirements. That's where I believe coding or programming, software development experience, I should say, having a background in software development, not just knowing how to code, but knowing how to take requirements and turn that into software, like all those skills are crucial. You're going to get so much more out of the vibe coding process if you've developed code before. That's just, I've talked to some of the other developers and my coworkers, and we all kind of feel the same way. Like I was able to use this to create an application, I think more effectively because I've done it without AI. I've built a Python Flask web application, right? So there's that.
And then I was curious, like when you see either that something is broken or you're just simply trying to understand where it's headed and what you need to do you straight up ask it, why is this section this way?
Yeah, sometimes I do. Yeah, sometimes I'll be like, investigate this bug first, right?
Okay.
And like, just spend some tokens, help me understand why this bug exists, and then let me decide what we do about it. Because if you just prompt it, hey, I found this bug, go fix it, it does that sometimes. Right? This is why sometimes you get a crappy application and sometimes you get a pretty good application. It's all about in the way you prompt it. So if you're just like, hey, this bug, go fix it, it might break something else or change the behavior of the application in a way that you didn't intend. So what I'll do is I'll be like, go find this bug, tell me why it exists. And it'll be like, this is the bug, this is what I think the bug is, and this is, why it's here. And then I'm like, all right, create me a plan to fix it. And it'll give me options. I'm like, create me a plan, but give me some options. And it'd be like, this is the quick fix, this is the medium fix, and this is like a bigger fix that touches a lot more code. And I'm like, do the first option, but then also do like checkpoint 2 from the second option. And I like that mixture. And I'll go do that.
Okay. So, and you were talking about the documentation being rather verbose. And is it the same? I've heard it's the same with the actual coding output. The lines of code can be rather verbose. But doesn't that mean overall that the same amount of logic is being done? So then I'm just thinking like future, because we're going to talk about the future of vibe coding.
Yeah.
And
Let's
discussing
talk
like
about
the amount of all right, let's go there. So like the current with lines of code.
Do we need a 5-second pause to transition?
Oh, do we? We can shake it out. Segue? We need
We
a
can
better
pause.
segue?
Sure. Okay, we're segue. Talking about the future of AI vibe coding. Everyone's going to be doing it.
Future. Hey, yeah, exactly. And so I was thinking like
Nice
Here we are. I mean,
dissolve.
it's already what some estimates are that vibe coding is being done
30%
of the time, even in mainstream software development. So
Sure.
with it being more verbose, and then there are continuing expansion of technology and access to it. So within 10 years' time, I would imagine it's exponentially more lines of code. And I would assume that a number of new languages would develop, though it may not be as big of a deal since people are getting to input in human language instead of specific code languages. But overall, wouldn't the amount of logic kind of stay the same, even if there were a lot more lines of code being done?
Yeah, it's a different way of coding, coding it more verbosely. I think is a little easier to understand maybe, but there's no relation to like more verbose code and logic, right? I think it's
Right.
just easier to read and understand. So maybe that does speak to logic. If it, kind of breaks it out in a much more lines of code to solve the problem, it's a little, in my opinion, is a little easier to read because you start doing those tricks where you can do like a whole bunch of stuff in one line and then you go back to it the next day and no one remembers how it works, and that's bad.
So
And then that can break your logic.
you kind of touched on a point there, and that's the the fun it is to take on somebody else's code.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think more verbose would be easier to take on. It's still less than fun to take on somebody else's code. But
Right, which is, it's an interesting point. I want to stop you right there, Lee, because I think this is a really shining moment for AI in coding, is using it to understand other people's code, right? I took in that other project. I read through some of that other project's code.
Shining
Claude,
or shiny?
Shiny and shining, both.
Okay.
Right. So I looked at that other person, the other repository, and I was like, go read and understand that and explain it to me. I was like, like, it's like, hey, it does code, it does this feature and it does it this way. I'm like, yeah, I like that. Let's do that, do that in our code. That's where I think it really helps development, is understanding other people's code.
Yeah, I'm having one of those, damn it, I'd wish that had that moment. I mean, that would be really awesome.
Well, also, I'm going to use it to explain it to me, right? I think the next step for me is put it in like VS Code, get Claude in. Now I've got my code editor, and I can I don't know exactly how it's going to work because I haven't tested it in a long time, but I'm going to point at like a block of code and be like, hey, can you explain that to me? Right. And that's how I'm
Right.
going to learn what it created.
Well, and that, like Lee, kind of what you were maybe thinking of. I was thinking that what makes me excited about that, aside from the future of what's coming, is that with the trillions of lines of code that already exist, especially in languages that aren't used as much, like Fortran or COBOL or even BASIC and stuff, that this is exciting because you can then analyze, use, like understand and pull all of that base logic and the base understanding forward. I mean, or if
I
you're
wonder how
tasked
well it
with,
works. I wonder how well it would work to port to code from one language to another. Like, hey, there's this thing written in C. Go rewrite it in Rust. I wonder
Now
how.
that I
I'm
have
sure people have
experience
tried
in,
this.
albeit
Yeah,
40 years ago.
but the process is the same, right? No matter when you did it or what language you're going to or from, there's basic building blocks and fundamentals of porting a code base from one language to another.
Well, and understanding what the code is doing.
Yeah.
And my very limited experience actually touches on something that I was thinking, and you brought up in terms of logic. And I'm curious to build on that discussion because my thinking of secure code development, I experienced it where I wrote a C code that translated a cryptanalytic piece of software that had been written in NSA's proprietary programming language,
Mm-hmm.
and it compiled. Therefore, it worked, right?
No.
Until I executed it on a small set of data, still seemed to work. But when I started throwing a lot of data at it, it came crashing down because there was a logic error in it
Yes.
that did not take into account the volume of data that might be handled. So I'm curious how Claude in this instance would approach, or how as a coder, a vibe coder, how you approach discovering logic errors. Because my first thought as you were describing your project was, how do you begin to capture or synthesize or artificially produce logic investigation? Because any AI is only going to be as logical as its inputs, correct?
Perhaps just having it create unit tests can help flesh out the logic flaws.
Perhaps.
And I haven't like spend a bunch of tokens to have it go create unit tests. That's probably one of the next things I want to do for it. I've got like a couple more features that I want to clean up and simplify, so that when it does create the unit tests are a little more simplified and we can fix the bugs a little more easily. But I think its ability to create unit tests is really good. I mean, I'm gonna test it, but Sam.
Well, this is what I wanted to hear about, Paul, because there's an article that came out about a month ago detailing the 7 days a developer spent trying to write an app like this. And he found that when he told it to create unit tests, it would tell you they had passed without actually running them.
Yes.
And when you tell it to describe the documentation, it will just make up lies. Have you noticed any hallucination or lies or what appears like attempts to deceive you?
Not so much attempts to deceive me, but more errors in the logic. So, for example, I've got like 3 different databases you can search, right? So one's the local NVD, the NVD API, and the local CVE database. And each 3 of those contain different data. Like CVE database doesn't contain a lot of metadata, right? That's why NVD is enriching it. But the local one, when you look at an NVD entry on the website, like it lists the source vendor, right? And it'll say like the Linux Foundation or ASUS or whatever. But that's not like, I don't know how they're getting that from the data that they make available and put in my local database. So I had these 3 checkboxes, and I was like, well, the user can select to search one or more of the databases. And then it would correctly search like one, and then it would try and search another one. And then the results, it would try and indicate like which database that it came from. But as I tried different searches, it would mess that logic up. I'd be like, well, no, I'm like that. So then it would just introduce all kinds of bugs. And if I tried to create unit tests off of that, it would probably hallucinate and tell me stuff is working when it isn't, because the logic is just too complex for it to handle. Or the way I designed it and prompted it also probably didn't help either. Now I want to do like the radio button thing. I want to say, all right, you're just going to search one database at a time and bring that back. So by simplifying the logic, then I'm going to go create unit tests off of that.
And so then you're going to run the unit tests. You're not going to trust the AI to tell you that it ran the unit tests.
I would like it to create test scripts for me then that
Right.
I could run. Yeah.
Right.
Agreed. Even if it got 80%, unit test and I went through them and cleaned them up, that's a huge time savings.
Right. Just to make sure there isn't a script that just returns true.
Right.
Now, actually, though, it sounds like you're developing a matrix of what you can do versus what Claude can do.
Yeah.
And I also suspect you also have checkpoints in your own process where you how's it going so far kind of stuff, that wellness checks, because you can't just click go. You've got to supervise it.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think that's why I want to create some test scripts so that as I'm building features, fixing bugs, modifying things, I'm like, all right, let's go back and regression test, because it's not great at regression testing right now. Now, I could probably tune the prompting, but it's not great at regression testing, which is interesting because usually junior developers aren't great at regression testing yet either. So,
does it even have the ability to run the code? I mean, it's just writing it like a document, right? It doesn't have a test environment to run it in, does it?
So it'll use, it'll figure out on its own or try how to test it, Sam. So what I noticed it doing, it was actually just using curl to send the appropriate post requests that would mimic what the user would do in the interface. And then it would store the results, and then it would... Mm-hmm.
How does it do that? Claude goes to the internet with commands, or it somehow interacts with your database?
It'll ask you. That's a good point. So Claude asks you, hey, I'm going to go out to the internet and do this search. Do you want me to do that? And those are other configuration things that you can do for Claude. Like, you got to put some boundaries around it, and also have it ask you, like, if it ever needs to remove a file, like, always ask me before you delete anything, right? In fact, I'm going to put that in like a prompt to put some of my own guardrails around what it can do.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that the previous developer found it would not obey. Tell it whatever you do, don't delete the database, and it would just do it. And also, I don't quite understand, where's the running environment where the code is running? I mean, you have like a GitHub repository of code.
It's in Docker.
So it's spinning up a Docker in the cloud, and Claude knows that and has access to it?
It's on my local system.
Okay.
So Claude can interact by running code on your local system?
Yes. And run Docker.
How are you?
In my case, it runs Docker.
So how do you know that it's not doing something wrong or bad with the ability to execute code on your system?
Oh, because I've looked at its Docker configuration.
Well, but no, I'm thinking... I mean?
Like, I manually, once it created the Docker file and Docker Compose, I looked at that, and it's just spinning up Python in a Docker container.
So it's got command execution on your local system. Can it run our arbitrary bash command on your local system from the AI?
If I allow it. So in every session, it asks you permission to run commands. And you can, so like if it runs grep, it's like, hey, do you want me to run this command? And then the second option is, do you want me to allow me to run the grep command, all the time in this session? And then the third option is, do you want to, and so
it's really going to be deleting it off of your local copy.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, like one of my coworkers ran into an instance where it ran a process kill command and killed all instances of bash. And so all of his terminals went away.
Yeah, and And I mean, Microsoft's version of this, when you install it, they will warn you, hey, if you give this thing control of your system, it might do dangerous things.
Yeah.
It sounds
You should
okay.
you should run it in a VM. I'm not quite there yet, but you should run it in a VM. I try and just put guardrails around it because it can. Yeah, I'm a little concerned about that as well. My recommendation is if you're going to do this, do it in a VM. I'm not doing it in a VM, which is pretty stupid.
Well, I have a stupid question. What's the difference between a VM and a local Docker container?
Different levels of virtualization.
Okay.
So a virtual machine is an entire operating system
Right.
virtualized. A container is more like processes and applications that kind of live in their own mini, not even virtualized, because it all runs off the kernel. So the technical
Docker
difference is,
yeah.
Go ahead, Sam.
Docker containers are considered much less safe because they actually share files with the host, whereas VMs have their own copy of every file. So it's safest to work in a VM, but working in a Docker container is still a whole lot safer than running directly on the host.
All right.
Your Docker containers run through the kernel that's running on your system.
On your main OS, whereas a virtual environment, it's all within
own
it.
kernel. Yeah.
So Paul, you are being
Separate
lazy.
kernel. I am. Yeah, for sure.
But but that within that VM, you could run Docker containers, and that you're just putting that VM at rest, not your whole hell.
Correct. Yeah. So if it blews something up or pulled down malware or whatever, it would be in a virtual machine, and I could blow it away. That's the much safer way to do it. Correct.
The funny thing is, I was just thinking about, instead of thinking virtualization, I was thinking how would you sandbox Claude? Is virtual machine, is there an easier,
there's
simpler
also
way?
There's some settings that I've yet to delve into where you can put local guardrails. And so like when it asks you, hey, can I run grep? I believe there's a way in Claude to say, like, here are the commands you can run. Here are the ones you should prompt the user. Here are the things you should never do. I just have to get a little better about defining more of those guardrails. Right now it's prompting me as it goes. But if you accidentally be like, oh yeah, you can always run the kill command and do whatever you want with it, then that could be bad, because then it could hallucinate and then kill a bunch of processes, delete a bunch of files.
Kill process ID 0, please.
Right.
So going back to the future of vibe coding.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, I think this is most definitely the future. So Claude is the best command line agent, is from what people have told me, and I've experienced that too. I think every developer is going to be using it probably my guess is in the short term to do what I did to create a base of an application, because that saves you so much time, right? Even just to get to a point, prompt it, create a command line version, create a basic web framework, put it in Docker, create some databases, and then start coding from that point. Oh my God. I mean, it just saved you so much time. Then I think the next thing is, once you've got like a base application, you're going to use a code editor and you're going to integrate Claude into it, and it's going to help you kind of as you go. And it continues to get better. I tell you what, I've been trying this out for a while now in different models. Claude Code for writing, for programming stuff, Claude Code is hands down the best.
So I have an opinion question for you, Paul. Based on your research and based on, we've mentioned on the show the last couple weeks here and there, not picking on her, but Jen Easterly is making the claim that, AI is going to create secure code and eliminate the need for a lot of our industry. Based on your research, sort of a two-part question: how plausible a claim do you think that is? And if it is or isn't plausible, where in your research are the key components that is going to make or break the AI being a watershed moment in cybersecurity? How's that for a vague opinion question?
No, it's a great question. I think that where we stand today is Claude, or not Claude, but AI's models in general can find vulnerabilities and can create patches for them. I don't believe there is enough intelligence in AI today to recommend 100% confidence that fix. In other words, it can recommend that fix, and that fix might be technically accurate, but a human has to go in and go, when I implement this fix, what else is it going to potentially break or do in my application, right? Again, I think it comes back to that regression testing. It's not quite smart enough to understand all the implications of changes to code in a code base. I think it might get there, but you're gonna use a lot more compute.
Well, let me ask the question in a different way. Who or what is putting into all these AI engines the concept of secure coding and the concept? How is the teaching happening of here's secure versus here's not secure, or it's got to be more than just discovering vulnerabilities, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's a notion of how it's trained that could get us, and I'm not sure this is how they trained it or not, but the theory that I've heard is if you train the model on, like, here's the application, understand the application, right? Here's the patches to that application that fix some kind of security thing, and train it on the vulnerable code, the patch, and the patched code. Now it's got enough understanding to be able to find vulnerabilities and recommend patches, right? So training it on all of the knowledge. So if you've got an application that you've taken from version 1 to version 12, right? Train the model on all that code, all the patches. So it learns what vulnerable code looks like, what a patch looks like, and then can take that learning and training data and go, well, if I find that similar vulnerability, I can apply a similar kind of patch.
But it still sounds like you still have to have oversight. You can't just you can't just trust it to do the right thing. You can hope it does, but you're still going to have to look over its shoulder.
Yeah, because sometimes it says it does stuff and it really doesn't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, you really didn't make that fit. But oftentimes it's funny. Recently, it's been a little better. It's like, no, I did make that code change and it is accurate, but I forgot to rebuild the application so the fix gets applied.
It sure does sound like
a common human mistake. I've made that mistake a million times when I was developing my own. I'm like, why isn't this fixed? I'm like, oh, I have to rebuild the Docker container. Oops.
So where are we on?
But sometimes, also sometimes it's like, oh, I forgot to like make this other change in this other file so that change actually takes effect, kind of thing. So it's sometimes I have caught it a couple of times hallucinating, going, yeah, I fixed that bug or I implemented that feature, and I'm like, no, you didn't. You didn't.
So, I mean, so back to the question we hinted at the top of the hour. We've talked about all the things it can do and the useful things and what you do on oversight. So where is that compared to the hype model? I mean, the reality versus hype, where are they? Yeah,
I think they're still miles apart, right? I think it is a tool that helps increase developer productivity. I don't think it's replacing anything. I think it's helping our existing processes. And I think the general feeling is that it's replacing things, where I think it's still augmenting and helping.
Yeah.
So how much time do you think you actually saved here?
Probably 100 hours. Just a wild ass guess.
So what percentage? I mean, you get twice as much done per hour or 10 times as much per hour or what?
Probably twice as much. I wouldn't be too generous with that because I did spend a lot of time prompting it and debugging. Although it's interesting though, like I can't really count the time spent testing the application on my own because I would have done that anyway if I was coding it versus Claude, right? So, yeah.
But I mean, if you say Paul saved 100 hours of his time, and Paul gets way more than $1 an hour, or you've probably more than offset the cost of the tokens you spent. And in fact, that's huge. I mean, it adds up.
Yeah. Well, because now with more tokens, I've also got it looking at hardware and spec sheets for the components to build certain types of embedded hardware. I'm like, go find me all the parts for it, go
Yeah.
analyze the diagram. And so it's helping with that. I've also going to start prompting it for, I want like a man in the middle router implementation, so I can put IoT devices on one side, my network and the internet on the other side, and be able to intercept all of the traffic, right? So I'm going to build a project for that. So yeah, I think it can help with all those things. But again, it's more an augmentation than Jarvis, right?
Yeah.
Because a couple of times when I was prompting, I felt like I was Tony Stark talking to Jarvis, right? But I think when you do that, you got to be more specific than in the movies, certainly, right?
So
To
then I'm going to
Jarvis,
throw out, is there an agentic AI out there that's been nicknamed Whopper yet?
I don't know, probably. So I think future, right? I know students that are studying computer science now. You gotta learn how to use these tools, right, and integrate it in.
Sure.
Certainly, learn how to code on your own, but also learn how to use these AI tools to help you. I think for people starting out, using it to understand the code is huge. Like when I first started programming, if I read code and I didn't understand it, I mean, this was before Google. Like I had to go to another developer and be like, "Can you help me understand this code? Because I'm completely lost." I think one of the great benefits, especially with people just starting out, speaking of the future, is that AI can do, even if it's 80%, right? It does a great job of helping explain things in code.
Mm-hmm.
Well, awesome. We're a little over time, so want to wish everyone happy Thanksgiving. Thank everyone for listening and watching this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. Over and out. Thanks, everyone.